Hi, my name is Zach Hakes, and this is my Great Lakes project for the end of our semester for GEO 105. My project is about invasive species and the Great Lakes, and I'm going to start by talking about just generally what an invasive species is, how they are most commonly introduced, some common examples of them, and then I'm going to move into more specifics about some examples that are unique to the Great Lakes and how they are affecting us here in the Great Lakes region. And then I'm going to briefly mention some ways that we can prevent them from spreading and deal with them and some more ideas about that. So here we go. So to start with, an invasive species is a species that is both non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm. And that sounds like a lot, but simply an invasive species is just one that is in a place where it shouldn't be, it wasn't always there, and it is having some kind of effect on its surroundings, both positive or negative. And human actions are actually the primary means of invasive species being introduced to new areas, and some common ways that they do that is through hitchhiking, which is when, as far as like aquatic species are concerned, they can actually like hitchhike off of ships that are passing through oceans and crossing from countries. The spread of humans globally through globalization and through accidental release. And it got kind of cut off at the bottom here, but I just want to make a note that once an invasive species is established in an ecosystem, it is very difficult to control its spread because a lot of them can reproduce and multiply very rapidly. So just some common examples here of invasive species that are found all over the world are the Asian carp, which you see in this first picture here. The bigger one, the bigger picture, is a lionfish, which is more saltwater. And then most recently, I don't know if you've heard anything about this in the news, but the murder hornet, which is from Japan. And just recently, a nest of them was found in North America, and scientists have jumped all over that, trying to stop that from spreading, and it's a whole murder hornet thing. But yeah, these are just some common examples of them. So, in the Great Lakes, according to the EPA, at least 25 invasive animal species have entered the Great Lakes over the past 2 centuries. That's just animal species alone. And plant species can also be invasive, which are also a growing problem in the Great Lakes region. And actually, before I started doing this project, it never really crossed my mind that plant species that plants could even be invasive. I don't know why I never really thought that that was a thing, but after doing this project, I can now say confidently that plants are considered to be invasive species in some cases, and it's pretty interesting. So let's jump in. So some common invasive species in the Great Lakes region that I'm going to be focusing on are the round goby, zebra mussels, the purple loosestrife, and the Eurasian water milfoil. And we'll get into those right now. So the round goby is a very small fish. Adults are between 3 to 6 inches in length. Adolescent round gobies are gray in coloration, and adults are yellowish and speckled. So this picture that I have here is of a adult round goby, and they are native to the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, which is over in Europe. They arrived in the Great Lakes in 1990 in the St. Clair River, and from there they have spread to all of the other Great Lakes by 1994. And they most likely came to the Great Lakes via ballast water from a European ship, probably traveling from either the Black Sea or the Caspian Sea to America. So some problems that the goby causes, they are very aggressive towards other fish, which you wouldn't really think was a thing considering how small they are. But they can displace native fish very rapidly, and they also can repopulate and reproduce very, very rapidly as well, which is probably why they spread to the rest of the Great Lakes after their arrival in only 4 years. They can also survive in poor quality water, which is a huge advantage that they have over other fish. And today, humans and their interactions with the environment actually have increased the poor quality of water all over the world. So the fact that they can survive in these poor quality waters is a good thing for them. And then an impact that they have on fishermen, which is kind of like more of a human impact, is they can steal the bait off of fishermen's hooks and they eat other fish's eggs, which makes fishing seasons kind of difficult here for people living in the Great Lakes region. The second animal that I want to talk about was the zebra mussel, which was also native to the Caspian Sea. You can easily identify them because if you look at this picture I have here, they have this zigzag brown pattern on the outside of their shell, which is how you identify them as zebra mussels. They are filter feeders, which means they suck in water around them and eat all of the microorganisms and stuff that's floating around in the water, and they pump it back out nice and clean. They most likely arrived into the Great Lakes also from ballast water from a ship, and they also have since spread throughout the Great Lakes system as well. This is just a side-by-side comparison of the zebra mussel and freshwater mussels. The picture on the left, you can see the zigzag shape of the zebra mussel, and then on the right, you see just common traditional freshwater mussels that are darker in coloration and don't have that easily identifiable striped pattern. So some problems that they cause. Another thing that they have in common with the round goby is they have a rapid maturity rate. So their offspring can spread rapidly and grow rapidly to produce more offspring, and the cycle just continues over and over again. And because they are so small and light, the currents of the lake bodies and river bodies and the weather helps them to scatter all over the place, much like dandelions do in the wind. You know, the dandelions that have the nice big white fluffy petals on the end of them. When you blow on it, they spread everywhere. That's kind of what I think about when I think about this. They're also causing freshwater mussels to die out. They're much more efficient at their filtration methods than freshwater mussels are. So the freshwater mussels aren't getting enough food compared to that of the zebra mussels, so they're starting to die out in larger quantities. And because they are maturing so rapidly and spreading so rapidly, they are taking up locations in the environment that are typically good for fish to spawn and grow up. So it's a lot harder for fish to lay their eggs in a safe environment that isn't occupied by these zebra mussels, and it's a lot more difficult for these fish to grow and mature. And then a human impact that they're having is they coat the inside of pipes that are underwater, and they clog up ship hulls, motors, docks, and marinas. And all of these things, it's not like a super dangerous thing that they're doing. I guess the biggest problem that they're causing is it's super expensive and inconvenient to get rid of them and to keep them at bay because they arise so easily and so rapidly. So moving away from animals, we're going to talk about plants now. And the first plant I wanted to mention was the purple loosestrife. And this plant, as you can see here, is classified as a perennial herb of the loosestrife family. And it has a strong taproot, which this main stem on the picture that you can see here, the main stem runs really deep into the ground and it's super thick, and it can have up to 50 stems arising from its base. It's easily identifiable by its purple flowers that you can see here. It was also native to Eurasia, and it covers a large geographical region in that area from Great Britain to Russia, North Africa, Japan, and Korea. And this plant was most likely introduced to North America also via ballast heaps from ships in the 1800s, and the first sighting in the Great Lakes region was in the late 1800s as well. So some problems that these plants can cause. You don't really think about plants causing problems, but they can easily adapt to wetland environments. And because they can easily adapt, they can reproduce easily and spread easily, and they reduce the size of hospitable wetlands, which in turn replaces native grasses, which would normally occupy these wetland spaces that now these purple loosestrifes are taking up. And their easy growth results in displacing several endangered species of their hunting/breeding grounds. An example of this would be the bog turtle. And a lot of these endangered species that rely on these grasses and flowering plants to have cover and safe places to grow and live, they are being displaced by these plants, and it is not helping their case as endangered species. And then the final species I wanted to talk about was the Eurasian watermilfoil, which this is kind of like a seaweed if you look at it, but not really. It has very thin stems, which can be brown, green, or pinkish white in coloration. It has small flowers that bloom from the main stems, which you can see on the bottom picture here. and it is also an aquatic plant. It was native to Europe, Asia, and northern Africa, and it most likely was intentionally introduced to the United States, meaning that someone from Europe probably brought it over on a ship and they were trading it on the market, made some money for it, and whoever received it planted it here in America, and it has since spread all over the place. Its Great Lakes origins was it was traded to the States, and from there it was planted across the country, as I just said, and the initial planting led it to it spreading all on its own. And some problems that it causes: it reduces the abundance and diversity of aquatic insects compared to communities where the plant is not present. It can provide cover for young fish to mature in safety, which is a good thing, but inversely, it makes it difficult for predators to hunt. So that's kind of like a pro and a con that it can have. And then a human impact that it has is it clogs boatways and channels, and it's a very expensive process to remove them, much like the zebra mussels. It can reduce water flow in some areas if dense enough, and it limits recreational activities. And then just to finish up here, according to the Alliance for the Great Lakes, which is a website that talks about invasive species and some ways that we can deal with them, they have two main ideas of how we can handle invasive species in the Great Lakes region. The most effective way and the most prominent way that they talk about is cleaning up ship ballast tanks, meaning just monitor what you're bringing into port with you. Don't just be dumping stuff randomly without checking to see what's in it or what's there. And then another kind of oddball idea that they had was separating the Great Lakes and Mississippi River basins, which obviously that would be a very long-term solution and something that would take a lot of work and effort to do. But the Mississippi River is a passageway for species to travel across the country, as it kind of runs right down the middle of our nation and out to the oceans. Species can use that as like a little hallway or a corridor to get from the oceans to freshwater bodies of water. But it also could have some unforeseen consequences if we were to do this that are similar to that of the reversal of the Chicago River, if you know anything about that. All right, and here are my references. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope it wasn't too boring, but yeah, that's all I got. Thank you very much.